Hey everybody, I'm Joey Workachuk and you're tuning into the Crystal Healer Summit, and I'm here with Meghan Sandor, who is astrologer and crystal astrologer, and I'm so excited to have her join us today. Meghan, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Joey. Well, yeah, first of all, thanks for having me do this interview. I'm super excited. So I am a crystal astrologer. I have been studying astrology for 4 years and practicing for about a year professionally. And I specialize in ancient and modern astrology, which is a weird combo because most people tend to lean one way or the other. But I find that there's really valuable elements in both approaches. So my approach blends them both. So what I do is I use the mythology that ancient astrologers use, but then I use the modern interpretation of the planets. So I find doing that, I get a really comprehensive overview of the skies, and it's very fascinating. So that's sort of my blended approach that I've been developing over the last 4 years. And I also use crystals in my astrology practice to supplement the energies of people's birth charts. So that's also something that I do.
No, it's so helpful. I'm such a fan and work with crystal astrology, and for me, it makes such a big difference. And working at a crystal store, the number one question that people come is I'm a Pisces or an Aries or a Gemini. What crystals do I need? It's never about like their situation. It's always about their chart.
Yep. And I will get to that later because I have lots of different things that I do for that. But yeah,
Before
no,
we get
for
into
sure.
that, can you share with us what your 3 favorite crystals are?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have them here actually. So, okay, my first favorite crystal is candle quartz. And I don't know if you can
Oh,
see it,
beautiful. Oh, I can see.
this, oh, I love this crystal so much. So candle quartz is also called pineapple quartz, and it's found in Madagascar, and that's the only place that you can find it. And it's called candle quartz because if you look at the little striations on the side here, it looks like a candle dripping wax, which is really cool. And it's different from clear quartz because it has more of like a warm, glowy energy to it. And it feels to me like holding a candle, and you get that little watery pool of light around a candle, and it's just so comforting. It's that same energy from this quartz. So I was given this piece of quartz by my best friend who is also a shaman, and he just picked this out one day and said, I feel like you need this for some reason. And he was right. So I've had this for about a year. And before that, I did not like quartz at all. But this this is the crystal. Like I swear, after I got this candle quartz, I just kept being attracted to all these different quartzes, and now they're like my favorite crystals. So that is probably my number one favorite. My second favorite is Numite, and I actually have it wrapped into a pendant because I wear it because that's how much I love it.
Yes,
And
you were wearing it the first time I ever met you, and I have a huge obsession with Numite as a powerful like sorcerer stone, and I was just like, oh, you're wearing Numite and you know what Numite's for.
yes. Oh my gosh. So, okay, Numite was actually the first crystal that I ever bought. My first crystal, I dug it from the ground, and like I can tell you that story later if you want, but Numite was the first one that I ever bought, and I have about like 5 or 6 pieces now. I wear it every day. And I love it because it really just connects you to your own personal power and your own spiritual gifts, because we all have individual spiritual gifts. And it's a really good stone to give to someone who's just starting their journey. And I was super attracted to it when I started to have my big spiritual awakening. It was just like Numite everywhere. I just needed it so badly. And now I wear it every day. It's really good for astrologers, I find, or for tarot readers, because it really helps to connect you to that divine source and that knowledge. So here it is. You can find it in Greenland I don't know
So
how much you know about
beautiful.
Numite, but yeah, with the gold flecks, it is one
Yeah,
of
I find it very helpful because it buffers esoteric information. Because a lot of the times when people are working with their third eye and their crown chakra and they're diving into tarot, diving into astrology, diving into like psychic mediumship, it becomes too much. And it's nice to be able to like float. Oh, it's 11:11. Make a wish.
Oh, wait, where's the candle quartz? Yes.
Yeah. So the thing is, I always find when I'm teaching my tarot course that Numite is the number one to really help people who just find it too much. Like there's just too much moving parts, and I'm just like, no, we'll like learn it piece by piece. Hold on to your Numite. So your last but not least crystal.
And I also wrapped this into a pendant because I love it so much. This is blue Terra quartz.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
I love this so much. It's really good for communication, for opening up that throat chakra, and I find it especially good for communicating with my guides. If I ever need to download information, it's really good for tarot reading. And I actually programmed this crystal specifically to help with astrology and to download information about astrology. So every time I give a talk about astrology, I always wear it because I find it combines those two energies of the downloads, but also being able to communicate what's coming through for me. So I love it. It's also just a really warm, compassionate, loving stone. I find it's really good for communicating your truth in a way that's gentle and not overwhelming. So I've been working with this piece for about a year and I love it so much. So that's my third
Wow,
favorite.
pretty amazing. It's a very lovely stone. So now is the part where what are you going to share with us about crystals and astrology today, Megan?
Okay, so about crystals and astrology. So I wanted to share with you something that I recommend to people when they ask, okay, I am this sign, what do I need for my crystals? So usually what I do is I will ask, what's your sun, moon, rising sign? And then I try to figure out from the three dominant signs what their dominant modality
I'm
is.
going to stop you right here. Can you explain for people who are tuning in what, in a short burst, what a sun, moon, and rising sign is and its significance? Because a lot of people always ask me that, and it's your turn to do a
Okay.
on that.
For sure. Okay. So, well, everyone knows their sun sign. It's the answer that you give when someone asks you what's your sign. So, for example, my sun sign is Leo. So, if someone asks what's your sign, I'll say I'm a Leo. So that's the one that everybody knows, and the one that you probably incorrectly check your horoscope for. So that's basically the position that the sun was in the sky when you were born. That is your sun sign. And so just like we have a sun sign, we also have a moon sign, a Venus sign, a Mars sign. So whichever signs each of the planets were in when you were born, that is their sign. So your moon sign is where the moon was when you were born. So my moon sign is in Scorpio because when I was born, the moon was in Scorpio. So that's my moon sign. Your rising sign is a little bit different, and it's actually a calculation that astrologers do.
And it's sometimes called ascendant, right?
Yes, your ascendant. So if you ever do a birth chart and you see the little ASC, that is your rising sign. It stands for ascendant. So that's the sign that was rising on the eastern horizon when you were born. So whichever sign was closest to the place where the sun rises, that's why it's called your rising sign when you were born.
And the moon sign represents your emotional body, your
Yeah.
true self.
That's correct. Yeah. So the moon, so the sun's, okay. So the sun is about your identity and what you project into the world. And it's how you see yourself and express that self. Your moon sign is your innermost emotions, your thoughts, your feelings. I think it's actually the truest reflection of who someone is.
100%. Like my sun is Pisces, my moon is Libra, and my ascendant is Capricorn, but I am such a Libra, it's not even funny.
Yes. And I think too that yeah, and like even Libra, like doing this collaboration, like that's a very Libra thing, like collaborating, working together, partnerships, like that's so Libra. And I think like most people, when they say to me, oh, I don't really resonate with my sun sign, the next question I ask them is, well, what's your moon sign? Let's figure it out. And then I read them the description of their moon sign and they're like, oh my gosh, that is me, because it is how you know yourself deep down. It's the things that you hide, right? So the moon always has this element of mystery around it. And so your moon sign is like those things that you hide from the world, but that you might know yourself deep down as. So it's your like very instinctual reactions to things.
And so could you explain in like point form what is so interesting about the ascendant?
Yeah, so the ascendant, your rising sign. So that is the sign that other people see you as, that you project. It is like your social mask. And ancient astrologers actually believed that the rising sign was the truest sign. They looked at your rising sign before the sun sign. We don't do that so much anymore because we've just discovered a lot more in astrology. But in a nutshell, it is how others see you. So my rising sign is Sagittarius, and a lot of people tend to see me as like this, like, like very like artistic, adventurous, like kind of just very easygoing, like all those Sag qualities. I don't feel like that deep down, but that's how people perceive me as.
Yeah, no, I find with my ascendant, I'm ascendant Capricorn, and I really do catch myself presenting myself as someone who's very business minded and successful. And I'm always kind of like playing the Capricorn like attitude when it comes to making decisions and being like very point blank, when like I'm a Pisces and a Libra, where it's just like not, it just comes out like almost like that's my first kind of thing to shoot with, is like a Capricorn attitude or a Capricorn fronting. And yeah, I find that very interesting. So thank you for explaining sun, moon, and rising for people who don't know. So continue on your quest about crystals and astrology.
Yeah, thanks, Joey. Yeah, so when people ask me, you know, what crystals should I get for my sun sign, I always try to get more information about their charts. And so we all know that the zodiac is broken up into 12 different signs, like Pisces, Capricorn, etc. That's pretty, you know, that's pretty standard. But all of those signs can be further divided into what we call modalities, which are fixed, cardinal, and mutable. So what that means is that so there's 4 fixed signs, 4 cardinal signs, and 4 mutable signs. Fixed signs tend to come in the middle of the season. So that's when you get your Leos, your Scorpios, your Libras. Those are all fixed signs. So cardinal signs come at the beginning of a season. So that's when you get your Capricorns, your Cancers, and then you get your mutable signs, which come at the end of the season. Now, mutable just means changeable. And so when you think of those mutable signs that happen towards the end of a season, so for example, like Gemini is a mutable sign, but Gemini comes at the end of spring, the end of June, beginning of July, when spring is transitioning over into summer. And so there's that, it gives the sign that element of change, of changeability. And then the fixed signs are at the very peak of the season, so they're fixed, right? The season is fixed in place, it's in its fullest expression. So that's when you got like your Leo, for example, at the height of summer, when the sun is strongest, when it's fixed in the sky, the season has really locked in there. And then you get your cardinal signs at the beginning of the season. So Capricorn, for example, is the first sign of winter. And so Capricorn is when winter is just really ramping up at the beginning of January. So
Pisces is what?
Pisces is mutable. So that's when winter is starting to change into spring. So then you get towards the end of March and then the end of February, early March. And then you get that changeability when you start to see winter just sort of shimmer over into springtime. So that's what Pisces represents. And in astrology, we believe that those different qualities go and infuse the sign. So for Pisces, for example, that quality of changing from winter to spring would infuse your sign with that changeability. We call that mutability. So when you take your 3 main signs, like for example with mine, I have Leo, Scorpio, and Sagittarius. Leo and Scorpio are both fixed signs. Sagittarius is a mutable sign. So if I was to go and pick crystals for myself, I would want to pick crystals that were more that had a bit of a stronger energy, because I have a lot of fixed energy, right? That's a lot of stubbornness, and that's the downside of fixed energy. You can get stuck in things, right? So therefore you would want crystals that like break you out of those patterns. It's a little bit harder. So people who have a lot of fixed energy, it takes a little bit more of a shove to get them out of certain patterns. And so if someone comes to me and says, this is my sun sign, my moon sign, my rising sign, I can say, okay, so you're going to need a little bit of an extra kick from a crystal. I'm going to give you something stronger, like a malachite, which is really good for Scorpios, by the way. I'm going to give you like a bit of a stronger quartz, something that's really sharp, that's going to really cut through that fixed energy. But then if someone comes to me and says, I have, a lot of dominant Pisces, or there's a lot of mutable energy, they're going to be a little bit more sensitive, because if you have a lot of mutable energy, you're a little bit more sensitive to those energetic flows and those different energetic changes in the atmosphere. That's why Pisces has that reputation for like being really connected and spiritual and being really sensitive to those energies, because it's a mutable sign, right?
Yeah.
You're really like changes in the air with a Pisces, and you're really sensitive to all those little tiny things. So for something like that,
I'm always, as you know, I'm always the first person to like freak out about something that I like, right. Not even a thing yet.
Right. Well, that's like, so like mutable signs. And if you look at all the mutable signs, they have reputations for being a little more like spiritually connected. Like for for Pisces, for example, Pisces is connected to the divine in such a huge way. And Sagittarius has that like spiritual fire, that prophet energy. And then you've got Gemini, who has that communication aspect, right? So they are considered more spiritual signs, but because they're more sensitive, you want a gentler crystal, like something like a malachite. If you give that to somebody with a lot of Pisces and they work with it every day, that's going to steamroller that.
Yeah, no, being Pisces, I've never been attracted to like aquamarine or like amethyst. I have lots of citrine and moldavite and pyrite, and I've always felt like that pyrite has really helped me calm down, but malachite is also very helpful too. So yeah, that this is really kind of even bringing it in a different perspective from even my crystal astrology practice. So what would you say is the best way to deal with crystals during Mercury in retrograde?
Mercury retrograde. Okay, so whenever any of the planets go retrograde, I always say my advice is to work with the energy, not to fight against it. So what I find is, especially during Mercury retrograde, because that's the one that everybody knows about, and so they'll come and they freak out and they're like, oh my gosh, Mercury's in retrograde, help me, I need to think clearly, I need to communicate clearly. But like the point of a Mercury retrograde is to not do that for a while, right? Like retrogrades exist for us to be able to go inwards and take some time out and to really work with that energy. So when Mercury, our communication planet, goes retrograde and it disrupts all of our short-term travel, our commutes, our communication, we're not supposed to be communicating outwardly during this time. We're supposed to take all of that communication energy and communicate with ourselves, connect with ourselves inward. We're supposed to go in, right? So I always recommend crystals that help work with the energy. So anything that helps with shadow work, like merlinite, obsidian, anything that works with like grounding that energy, any kind of jasper, like really good grounding.
So here's a question, sorry to cut you off, but this is what people kind of get really scared about, the word shadow work. What is shadow work?
So shadow work happens when you go through periods of spiritual upgrades. And so what happens is that stuff comes out, or when you're faced with a situation that you respond to in a way that maybe you don't particularly like, it's those qualities of yourself that are slightly hidden and that we tend to repress because we don't like them, right? So if you respond to a situation in a certain way, and then you think, oh, where did that come from? Like, I don't like that about myself. Part of your work and your challenge for shadow work is to recognize that you have these qualities, and that's okay, and to find ways to integrate them and to really peer into the shadows of your own psyche, figure out what's there, love that unconditionally, and then figure out how you can integrate that into the rest of your being. And that's a huge upgrade. So that's tough work. It's hard to do. But back to your question about Mercury retrogrades, they exist for us to be able to take time out and check in with ourselves and see what comes up for us during that time. So a good like concrete example of how this could work during a retrograde is if you commute to work every day and then Mercury goes retrograde and then there's a huge traffic jam and you find yourself getting super annoyed in the traffic jam and you're like honking your horn, you're getting so frustrated at the other drivers. And then this comes up and you think to yourself, oh my gosh, like I hate the way that I'm reacting to this. Like I thought I was a patient person. Why am I getting so impatient? Like that's an example of your shadow coming up. And that's an example of how a Mercury retrograde could potentially trigger that. So doing that shadow work, it's calling us to go inward and saying, oh, I guess I'm not as patient as I thought I was. So how can I be aware of this for next time? And it's just all part of that mindfulness practice. So I always recommend working with the energy of retrogrades. Like don't fight it. Don't try to make things clearer because they're not supposed to be during those times. So I always just say like go with the flow. I know it's uncomfortable, but try to just work with it as much as you can and take the time out that you need.
Wow. Thank you so much, Meghan, for taking the time to share your knowledge and expertise with us. This was such an informative interview. For those who are interested in connecting with Meghan, her website link is going to be in the email underneath her bio. Thank you so much, Meghan, and I look forward to seeing you very soon.
Thanks, Joey. Thanks for your time.
Bye.
Bye.